Gamers are great, but sometimes we let our love of a genre or brand get in the way of what is really best for us. Let's chat about it in the comments below, but first, my opinion. I'm Tarmac, and this is Feature Creep. Business is a funny thing. If you attend any business school, you will inevitably take a course or two on ethics to remind you how to be a decent human being and make sure that you don't take advantage of others. And I need to preface all of this by saying that there are absolutely ethical indie developers out there making games the best way they know how and doing what they need to do to stay in business. However, in a time of unprecedented economic troubles, it is worth it for gamers to think about the industry we all know and love, what parts of it benefit us, and which we should be trying to avoid or condemn. And if you follow game news even badly, it's hard to come away with the belief that the industry is changing in a way that is better for gamers themselves. What does it mean to be pro-consumer? Well, simply it means putting anything which benefits the gamer, regardless of the needs or wants of the game industry, ahead of everything. It means that I can't be bothered to take the best interest of developers or publishers into account because I need to fight for myself first and foremost, what benefits me as a buyer of video games, period, full stop. Just because the industry isn't moving in a great direction in many respects doesn't mean that it can't. Gamers have a lot of power in this equation, but the problem tends to be one of education and persistence. Where some of this becomes frustrating is to see groups who by their very function should be fighting for gamers' interests above others, but don't. I see two groups here, the first being game news media, and the second, gamers themselves. Game news media is frustrating here because it's been known for some time that there's something of a parasitic relationship with the game publishers. If a news media company doesn't toe the line with a publisher, they will get their advanced access revoked or delayed, get blacklisted, etc. But a game news outlet should, by all accounts, be a more impartial provider of information. And while I know there are always biases in any broadcast, the corruption on display in the game news media is pretty stark. You need to look no further than game ratings over the past 20 years. We've quite literally gotten to the point where an 8 out of 10 is considered by many to be a bad thing. And if you think this isn't the result of publishers controlling early access to games, then I have a bridge to sell. Obviously, game media is in a pretty rough changing world right now. They went from publishing magazines and minor TV shows to online competition for ad views and clicks with really no plan at all. However, what you'll also find is that they're not comprised of journalists or folks educated in ethics. I'm going to paint with a broad brush here, so let the exceptions through, but most game media pundits and news personalities are no more educated in how journalism or business works than I am in how to deliver babies. It's similar to the broader game industry in that it's an employer's market. There are endless passionate writers who would love to write about video games, so hiring is very easy. The sheer volume of game media articles and videos lacking even the basics like a second source on information or any kind of citing of sources at all is staggering to me. Now, I'm no professional journalist either, so does that invalidate any of what I'm saying here? I suppose it becomes a question of your judgment. In much the same way, I have my favorite game media folks that I follow, who, regardless of whether I agree with their opinions, the quality of their reporting is simply unquestionable. Once you remove the fluff, these folks genuinely put out important information valuable to gamers regardless of what some corporate suit may want them to say. There are a few, but I'd name drop Jason Schreier and Jim Sterling as examples. The thing that you need to consider as a gamer when looking at game news and when seeing debates about things online is that the other side of the equation doesn't have your best interests at heart. Now again, don't get all hurt because you have your favorite indie dev who does all the right things. There are exceptions here, just not many of them. But I need to be crystal clear on this, that any company of size does not, and in fact cannot, put the needs of the customer ahead of the needs of itself. As a result, customers should act in precisely the opposite way, to at the very least provide a counterbalance. When you argue for a company's best interest over your own, you're actually causing real damage. In the corporate world, there's this thing called a board of directors. These are the people who are in charge of the company from a very high-level, top-down perspective. Every company has a board of directors, but all of this is of particular interest with regard to public companies. I'll use Electronic Arts for example, but Valve has a board of directors as well, and so does every tiny indie studio that has properly registered a company to operate under. EA has 9 members on its board of directors, 7 directors, CEO Andrew Wilson, and a chairman. This is just a quick primer, but every public company and every private company has shares and shareholders. This simply determines who owns the company, but those shareholders determine who the board of directors is made up of. It does get a bit more complicated when you get into the public companies where shares can be purchased on the open market, but this is essentially how things operate. That board of directors has a legal obligation to work in the best interests of the company and its shareholders. I mean that literally. If they do things that are not in the best interest of the company, they can be found legally liable and sued for it. Compound that with the shareholders being the ones who collectively determine who sits on the board of directors, and directors who don't perform well enough get fired. This system is the basis upon which capitalism is built, and it's why government is responsible for any regulation, because it's the only organization big enough to stop business from becoming abusive. As a minor aside, this is why small companies are more ethical, because they're owned usually by only a small handful of people, and those people are only legally liable to each other. So long as those owners agree to do ethical things instead of whatever they can get away with to make money, there is no real legal jeopardy. Big corporations with large ownership pools, however, cannot do this. A lot of folks don't understand this consumer-to-business relationship, and they rush to the defense of multi-million and billion-dollar companies instead of thinking a little more selfishly. And I think this is very important that gamers as a whole start to view their relationship with these companies as a bit more competitive. Yes, they make a product you want to have, and yeah, those products might be great a lot of the time. There is loyalty to be bought here, with the quality of goods being exchanged. But maybe don't be so quick to defend companies whose job it literally and legally is to make as much money as possible without regard for what is best for you as a gamer. That's, I think, where it comes to education. A lot of people don't really understand how business works, why a CEO might get fired, or even why they make so much money with giant signing bonuses and stock options in the first place. And then there's the fact that I've mentioned in the past, but is more relevant the faster the industry grows. Every game is someone's first pre-order. It's a little pedantic to put it that way, but essentially every video game of any reasonable size is somebody's first game, someone's first step into being a gamer. You want to know why people keep pre-ordering games despite getting burned on crap in the past? It's in large part because they haven't been burned before. The more the industry grows, the more people come in who don't know any of the history. And many of these gamers are younger gamers who frankly have never seen anything different than how it is right now. They don't know about cheat codes that used to be free, they just see boosts available as a digital purchase. They don't know games used to have a more bug-free launch because there was no or limited patching that could be done. They don't know how many big game companies treat their employees like they're expendable, because it's an employer's market and there are tens of thousands of enthusiastic replacements. They don't know how much DRM has changed, or how little refund policies have changed. Hell, there will even be gamers right now who don't know that games used to cost $60, and that's very, very recent history. It's important when dealing with anything that you're passionate about to consider what you're up against. Does Microsoft really need you bashing PlayStation owners in online forums? And does it really benefit you to do that? Does it benefit you to argue online that games are so expensive to make and we should be happy to pay more, whether upfront or digitally after the fact? Does it benefit anyone who plays games that DRM quite literally gives paying customers a worse experience than the pirates have? Does it benefit you as a gamer to attack people trying to bring attention to bad business in the game industry like employee abuse, political change, or similar heavy issues? In my view, gamers have something of an obligation to not be doormats. It's true in all aspects of life to some extent, but here in particular I think it's important. The companies making the vast majority of games you will ever hear about literally are legally obligated to do the thing that makes them the most money without even considering what your best interests are. And the game news media are conflicted on providing you the best information because their business model relies on clicks and early access to games. So you need to be very picky on who you trust to get your news from. There has to be a counterbalance because without it, everything is heavily skewed not in your favor as a gamer. So when you debate people in online forums, or when you read news articles, see press releases or trailer footage, I think it's best to be selfish and consider how does this change news item affect me now and in the future? Is it good for me if a company burns out its employees with endless crunch? Is it good for me if I have to pay another $10 for every video game? Am I getting value from buying a game that has parts that are so boring I have to pay to skip them? As I started this piece, gamers do have a lot of power here. It's just fragmented and spread out. In order for us to affect any change in our own best interests, we do, to some extent, have to act as a group, and that still requires getting the word out and educating folks on why things are bad. Something that I miss trying to do. Something I'd like to start doing again. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Tarmac, and that's all I have to say.